Table 7 was already a disaster. Elena Vasquez Chen could see it from across the dining room, the way Preston Whitmore IV held court like he owned the restaurant, his Loro Piana jacket draped over the chair beside him, his laugh cutting through the quiet elegance of the Columbine room. His date, a blonde woman half his age, sat with her hands folded, smiling at nothing. Elena checked her reflection in the service window, 34 years old, hair pulled back so tight it made her temples ache. Non-slip shoes with a sole that was starting to separate. She'd glued it twice this week. $800, she thought. I need $800 tonight. 11 days. That was how long she had until Maya's next appointment. 11 days to cover the gap between what she had, $847.33 in an account she checked obsessively, and what she needed. The treatment cost $8,400 a month. The math never worked. But Maya was 7 years old and she was fighting, and Elena would figure it out. She always figured it out. She grabbed her order pad and walked toward table 7. Preston didn't look up when she arrived. And the help in these mountain towns, he was saying to his date, voice pitched just loud enough for Elena to hear. You'd think they'd at least train them, but half of them barely speak English. Elena stood at the edge of the table, waiting. 3 seconds, 5, 10. Preston continued talking as if she weren't there. His watch caught the candlelight, a Patek Philippe, she noted automatically. $42,000 minimum, the same watch Marcus had wanted before he left, before Maya got sick, before everything. Sir, Elena kept her voice pleasant, neutral, the voice she'd learned in 100 diplomatic briefings when neutrality was the only weapon she had. Welcome to the Columbine room. May I start you with something to drink? Preston glanced at her. Not at her face, at her shoes. His lip curled slightly. Finally, he said, we've been waiting. They hadn't. She'd been watching the table. They'd been seated for 90 seconds. I apologize for any delay. The words came automatically. Don't react. Don't give him anything. Our wine list features several excellent. I know what I want. Preston cut her off. The Screaming Eagle 2018. He turned to his date. You'll love it, Caroline. It's impossible to find outside of Napa. Caroline nodded, still smiling that empty smile. Elena wrote it down, the Screaming Eagle, $1,200 a bottle, her entire month's grocery budget gone in a single pour. Excellent choice, she said. I'll have that brought right away. And for dinner, Preston looked at her again, this time at her face, studying her like she was a curiosity. Your accent, he said. Where's that from? It's not quite right. 3 languages, Elena thought. I speak 3 languages better than you speak English, but she kept her expression smooth. California, originally. Preston's eyes flicked to Caroline. You can always tell breeding by the details, the shoes, the accent, the little things. Caroline's smile flickered just for a moment. Elena felt the heat rise in her chest. She pressed her pen harder against the pad. For dinner, she said again, might I recommend the elk? It's sourced locally from Carbondale. I know where elk comes from. Preston waved his hand. We'll order when my associates arrive. You can go. Elena turned and walked away. Her hands were steady, her face was calm. Inside, she was counting. That's 2, she thought. The shoes, the accent, 2. She'd learned to count them years ago back in Washington. Every slight, every dismissal, every reminder that she existed in spaces where people like Preston believed she didn't belong. Counting helped. It made the anger into arithmetic, something she could manage. She delivered the wine. Preston made her wait while he swirled it, sniffed it, held it to the light. Then he sent it back. This isn't right, he said. The color's off. The color was perfect. Elena had been trained to notice details like that, but she brought another bottle, same vintage, same vineyard. Preston accepted it with a wave. 3, she counted. His associates arrived at 7:45. 2 men in suits, one older, one younger. The younger one, Asian, took the seat across from Preston. His name was James, based on the greeting. James Sue. Elena filed it away, the way she'd filed away thousands of names and faces in another life. She approached to take their orders, and then Preston switched languages. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. I'm telling you, she can't even read the menu. Mandarin. Formal. Textbook, actually, the kind they taught at Harvard and Yale to students who wanted to work in international finance. Elena recognized the accent instantly. The tones were technically correct, but slightly flat. No music to them, no life. She kept her face blank. James Sue laughed uncomfortably. Preston, come on. Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Preston gestured at Elena with his wine glass. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Look at her. She doesn't even know what we're saying. Elena stood perfectly still. He doesn't know, she thought. The realization was cold and clear. He has no idea. 13 years. That's how long she'd spoken Mandarin, learned from her grandmother first, then refined at Georgetown, then polished in 100 high-stakes negotiations at the State Department. She'd interpreted for the Secretary of State. She'd read transcripts that never made it to newspapers. She'd been so good they called her the Bridge because nothing got lost in translation when Elena was in the room. But that was before Maya, before Marcus left. Before she'd cashed out her pension and maxed out 3 credit cards and taken a job serving wine to men who couldn't see her. Preston was still talking. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Look at her shoes, she looks like a beggar. James Sue didn't laugh this time. He looked away. Elena wrote down their orders. Her handwriting was steady. Her breathing was even. Inside, she was calculating. If I say something, I lose this job. If I lose this job, Maya doesn't get her appointment. If Maya doesn't get her appointment, she couldn't finish the thought. Is there anything else? She asked in English, voice pleasant, professional. Preston smiled. The kind of smile she'd seen on 100 faces just like his, men who confused wealth with worth, status with substance. Men who thought language was a wall they could build and she couldn't climb. Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, he asked her directly, slowly, mockingly. Do you understand? The table went quiet. It was a test. She knew it was a test. He wanted to see her stumble, wanted to watch her fail at something he assumed she couldn't do. Say nothing, she told herself, just walk away. But Preston wasn't finished. He turned to James Sue, switching back to Mandarin. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. This is exactly the problem I was talking about. The people they send can't even read English or anything else. Watch this. He looked at Elena. His smile widened. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Tell me the historical origin of this dish. In Mandarin, he pointed at the menu. The elk, the dish she'd recommended. James Sue shifted in his seat. Preston, this isn't Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. I just want to see if she can speak at all. Silence. Elena looked at Preston, at his smirk, at the $42,000 watch on his wrist, at the way he'd built his entire evening around proving she was less than him. Her hands weren't shaking from humiliation. They were shaking from restraint. Across the room at table 4, an older woman in a simple black dress set down her water glass. She'd been watching the entire exchange. Her eyes met Elena's, and in that moment Elena felt something shift, a decision forming, a door opening. She didn't know who the woman was, not yet, but somehow Elena understood. The night wasn't over. The kitchen door swung shut behind Elena. She leaned against the cold steel of the prep counter and closed her eyes. The sounds washed over her, the clatter of plates, the hiss of the grill, Maria calling out orders in rapid Spanish. Normal sounds, safe sounds. Her hands were still shaking. You could have said something, she thought. You could have stopped him. But stopping him would have cost her something she couldn't afford to lose. Not the job, though she needed that too. The control. The discipline she'd built over 13 years of listening to men like Preston say terrible things and choosing, deliberately, not to react. Elena. David appeared at her elbow. The manager looked nervous. He always looked nervous. Table 7 okay? I saw the gentleman seemed animated. Everything's fine, she said. The lie came easily. They're ready for their entrees. David nodded, already moving toward the next crisis. He didn't want to know. Knowing would require action, and action might upset wealthy guests. Elena turned to the window where the plates waited. Elk medallions, juniper reduction. A geometric arrangement of roasted vegetables that someone in the kitchen had spent 15 minutes perfecting. She stared at the food and thought about who she used to be. 3 years ago, she'd had a desk on the 6th floor of the State Department. GS 13. A salary that felt comfortable, if not extravagant. The kind of career that made her grandmother, the woman who'd first taught her Mandarin in a cramped apartment in San Francisco, weep with pride. You speak for America, her grandmother had said. My granddaughter speaks for America, and she had, for 8 years. She'd sat in rooms with cabinet secretaries and foreign ministers. She'd interpreted 3 meetings for the Secretary of State herself, conversations that shaped policy, that moved money, that decided things ordinary people never heard about. Her specialty was what the academics called tonal contour analysis, the meaning behind the meaning. The slight emphasis that turned a diplomatic yes into a political no. She'd published 2 papers on it. Other interpreters used her work as a training manual. Then Maya got sick. Elena remembered the exact moment, the phone call in her office, the pediatrician's voice too careful, too measured. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The words hadn't made sense at first. Maya was 4 years old. She liked dinosaurs and drawing and asking why the sky was blue. Children like Maya didn't get cancer. Except they did, all the time. Marcus had lasted 7 months. That was how long it took for Elena's husband to decide he couldn't handle it. The hospital visits, the insurance fights, the slow erosion of everything they'd planned. He left on a Tuesday, took the Audi and half their savings, and vanished to Seattle with a woman from his office. Elena cashed out her pension, maxed 3 credit cards. Moved from D.C. to Glenwood Springs, where the rent was cheaper and she could get Maya to Children's Hospital Colorado in under 2 hours. The State Department didn't fire her. She resigned. There was a difference, though some days she couldn't remember what it was. Now she served elk medallions to men who couldn't see her. Elena picked up the plates and walked back to the dining room. Preston was still holding court. His voice carried across the restaurant, that particular tone of someone who had never been told to lower it. She approached the table, set down the first plate in front of Caroline, then James Sue, then Preston's other associate, a quiet man who hadn't said much all evening. Preston didn't acknowledge her. He was deep in conversation with James, and he'd switched to Mandarin again. Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, she's still here. Preston gestured vaguely in Elena's direction. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Look at her. How much do you think she makes in a month? 2003. James Sue shifted uncomfortably. Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Maybe we could. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. No, no, I find it interesting. Preston's smile was sharp. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Her figure's decent, if you like that type. Maybe that's why they hired her. Elena set down the final plate. Her face revealed nothing. He's talking about my body, she thought. He's speculating about why I was hired. She added it to the count. 5. Chinese letter, 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 enjoy your meal. She said it before she could stop herself. The words came out in perfect Mandarin, Beijing dialect, formal register. The exact tone she would have used addressing a diplomat in an official meeting, polite, precise, and devastating in its implications. The table went silent. Preston's wine glass stopped halfway to his lips. James Sue's eyes widened. Caroline looked between them, confused by the sudden tension. Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. What did you say? Preston's voice was different now, uncertain. Elena looked directly at him. For the first time all evening, she let him see her. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. You ordered the elk with juniper reduction. She kept her voice steady, calm, the voice of someone who had once interpreted nuclear nonproliferation, talks without breaking a sweat. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. The elk was sourced from a ranch in Carbondale, about 40 miles from here. As for your Mandarin, she paused. Let the silence stretch. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Your pronunciation is correct, but the accent is clearly Harvard-trained. Textbook, but not native level. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. I'd rate you intermediate advanced. Passing, but barely. She used Chinese letter throughout. The formal you, the one reserved for elders and superiors, and people you wanted to address with devastating politeness. Preston's face went through several colors. Red first, then white. James Sue made a sound that might have been a laugh, quickly suppressed. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Is there anything else you need? Elena asked. For 3 heartbeats, no one spoke. Then Preston's chair scraped back against the hardwood floor. You. His voice had changed completely. The smooth confidence was gone. In its place was something raw and ugly. You were listening the entire time. I was doing my job, sir. You were eavesdropping. He stood, knocking his napkin to the floor. On confidential business discussions, that's corporate espionage. The words hit Elena like ice water. She'd expected anger, embarrassment, not this. I was taking your order, she said carefully. David. Preston didn't take his eyes off Elena. His voice carried across the restaurant, and conversations at nearby tables went quiet. David, I need the manager. Now. David appeared within seconds, his face already apologetic. Mr. Whitmore, is there a problem with this woman? Preston pointed at Elena. She's been listening to private conversations in Mandarin. Deliberately, she understood everything we said and she chose to spy on us. Sir, I wasn't. Be quiet. Preston cut her off. You've done enough damage. He turned to David. I want her fired, tonight, this instant. David's face went gray. Elena watched him calculate, the wealthy customer, the scene unfolding, the other guests pretending not to stare. Mr. Whitmore, perhaps we could discuss this in private. There's nothing to discuss. She's either out or I'm calling my attorney. Preston straightened his jacket. The Loro Piana, $4,200 retail. Do you know who I am? Do you know how much I've spent at this hotel? 6, Elena thought. That's 6. But the count felt hollow now. Something was slipping away from her, something she couldn't afford to lose. And another thing, Preston's voice dropped, more dangerous. My card case. It was on the table when she came to deliver our food. James Sue frowned. Preston, I don't think it's gone now. Preston's eyes locked on Alina. Sterling silver, my initials engraved, worth about $2,000. The air in the restaurant changed. Alina felt it, the shift from embarrassment to accusation, from insult to crime. I didn't take anything, she said. Then you won't mind emptying your pockets. Preston's smile was back, the predator's smile. Or should we call the police and let them search you? David stood frozen. Around them, the restaurant had gone completely silent, forks suspended, conversations stopped, everyone watching. Alina, David's voice cracked. Maybe you should just show him. She understood then. David wouldn't protect her. He couldn't afford to. Preston was the guest who mattered, and she was the server who could be replaced. Slowly, Alina reached into her apron pockets. She pulled out her order pad, a pen, a crumpled receipt, nothing else. There, she held her hands open. I don't have your card case. Check the kitchen, Preston said to David. Her locker, her bag, I'm not leaving until we find it. He pulled out his phone. Or until the police do. Alina's chest tightened. If the police came, if there was an arrest, a charge, anything on her record, the custody agreement with Marcus could be reopened. Maya's stability could be threatened. Everything she'd sacrificed for could collapse because a man with a $42,000 watch decided to punish her for speaking his language. This can't be happening, she thought. Not over this, not tonight. Excuse me. The voice came from behind them, quiet but clear. The kind of voice that didn't need volume to command attention. Alina turned. The woman from table 4 stood 3 feet away. Small, silver hair, a simple black dress and an old Cartier tank watch, understated elegance that made Preston's flashy status markers look desperate. Preston's face went white. Margaret, his voice cracked on the name. I didn't realize you were. I heard everything, Preston. The woman's English carried a trace of Mandarin rhythm. Subtle, musical, every word in both languages. She turned to Alina. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, recognition, maybe, or understanding. The connection between two people who knew what it meant to survive in rooms full of men who couldn't see them. Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Margaret said softly. I know who you are. Alina's breath caught. The woman smiled. And I think we have a lot to talk about. The restaurant held its breath. Margaret Chen stood perfectly still. She was perhaps 5'2". Silver hair pulled back simply. That old Cartier tank watch catching the candlelight. Nothing about her screamed wealth or power. But Preston Whitmore looked like he might be sick. Margaret, his voice had lost all its polish. I didn't know you were dining here tonight. If I'd known, I would have. You would have what? Margaret's tone was pleasant, almost conversational. Been a different person? She didn't wait for an answer. Instead, she addressed the room. Not loudly, she didn't need volume. When Margaret Chen spoke, people listened. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm the founder of Meridian Global. She paused. For those who don't follow venture capital, we manage about $4 billion in assets. Mr. Whitmore has been courting my investment for 6 months. Preston's face went gray. I came here tonight to observe him in an unguarded moment, to see who he really is when he thinks no one important is watching. Margaret's gaze swept across the silent diners, then landed on Preston. I've seen enough. James Sue took a quiet step away from Preston, then another. Margaret turned to Alina. The shift in her demeanor was immediate, warmer, almost gentle. I wasn't lying when I said I know who you are. Your paper on tonal contour analysis in diplomatic settings, my firm used it to train interpreters for 3 years. Alina blinked. You read my paper? I've read both of them. The second one, on emotional subtext in high-stakes negotiations, was required reading for my entire Asia team. Margaret smiled. I've been trying to find you for 18 months. You disappeared from the State Department and no one would tell me where you went. I had to. Alina stopped. There were circumstances. Your daughter. Margaret's voice softened. I know. I made some calls after I recognized your face tonight. Preston had been silent, processing, calculating. Now he stepped forward, and Alina saw the desperation in his eyes. a cornered animal looking for any weapon. Margaret, you can't possibly be taking her side. He forced a laugh. She's a server, a failed government worker who couldn't hack it in the real world. Now she's playing victim with some sob story about a sick kid. The temperature in the room dropped. How do we even know the kid is really sick? Preston's voice rose. He was losing control, but he couldn't stop. This could all be an act. A sympathy scam. These people, Margaret's words cut like ice. You know what I mean? She probably doesn't even have a daughter. It's a hustle. She speaks a little Mandarin and suddenly she's some kind of, her daughter's name is Maya. Margaret's voice was quiet, devastating. She's 7 years old. She was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia 3 years ago. Elena cashed out her pension, maxed her credit cards, and moved to a town where she knew no one, also she could be closer to Children's Hospital, Colorado. Preston opened his mouth, nothing came out. She gave up a career that most people would kill for. She gave up her marriage, her savings, her identity. Margaret stepped closer to Preston. And you sat at that table and mocked her shoes. The silence was absolute. I had a daughter once. Margaret's voice caught, just for a moment. Lily. She died of leukemia 15 years ago. She was 9. Elena felt something shift in her chest. Margaret wasn't just defending her. This was personal. I would have given anything for one more day with her. Margaret looked at Elena. Don't waste yours working for people who don't see you. Preston tried one more time. Margaret, be reasonable. The term sheet is dead. Margaret didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. And by tomorrow morning, every LP in my network will know exactly what kind of man you are. Your reputation for cultural sensitivity, she let the words drip with contempt, ends tonight. Caroline was already gathering her things. She wouldn't meet Preston's eyes. James Sue cleared his throat. I should mention, I was recording notes on my phone. For the meeting, audio notes. Preston's face went white. I'm sure that recording will be useful, Margaret said mildly. If anyone questions my account. A server, not Elena, a young man from the kitchen, appeared at the edge of the scene. He held something in his hand. Sir, he addressed David, the manager. We found this under table 7. It must have fallen. It was the card case, sterling silver, initials engraved. It had been under Preston's chair the entire time. David took it slowly, looked at Preston, looked at Elena, said nothing. There had never been a theft, only cruelty looking for a weapon. Margaret turned to Elena. I need a senior analyst, someone who understands not just languages, but what's being said between the lines. The salary is $165,000, plus full benefits. Your daughter would have coverage from day one. Elena couldn't speak. The number echoed in her head. $165,000, coverage from day one. Maya's next appointment was in 11 days. Bills that had been crushing her, the debt that had felt like drowning. You don't have to answer now, Margaret said, but I hope you'll say yes. Elena looked at Preston. He was standing alone now. Caroline had left. James Sue had moved to a different table. Even the other diners had turned away as if proximity to his humiliation might be contagious. He reached for his wine glass. His hand was shaking. Elena felt something unexpected, not triumph, not satisfaction, pity. He was so small. All that cruelty, all that performance, and underneath it, just a frightened man who needed to make others feel inferior so he could feel like anything at all. Yes, she said to Margaret, I'll take the job. She untied her apron, set it on the nearest table, and walked out of the Columbine room, not through the kitchen, through the front door. 6 months later, Elena's office had a window. It was a small thing, but she'd spent 3 years in a restaurant with no natural light, and now she made a point to notice. She was preparing for a conference presentation, tonal patterns in diplomatic negotiations, building on her earlier papers when her phone buzzed. A video message from Maya's school. Elena pressed play. The screen filled with a second-grade classroom. Maya stood at the front, healthy and strong. Her hair had grown back in soft waves. She was pointing at a whiteboard covered in Chinese characters. Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Maya said, counting for her classmates. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. This is what my mom taught me. The other children repeated after her. Stumbling over the tones, giggling, Maya smiled at the camera. My mom speaks to important people, but she says I'm the most important person she speaks to. Elena's vision blurred. She typed a single character in response, Chinese letter love. 3 minutes later, another message arrived. A photo this time, a crayon drawing. Elena rendered in bright colors, surrounded by speech bubbles filled with squiggly lines, different languages, as imagined by a 7-year-old. A red cape flowed behind her. The caption, written in Maya's careful handwriting, "My mom is a word superhero." Elena pressed the drawing to her chest and let the tears come, not from exhaustion, not from relief, from joy. Outside her window, the sun was setting over the mountains. Somewhere in the distance, a restaurant was serving dinner to people who would never see their servers as human beings. But Elena was done being invisible. She had found her voice, and she would never be silent again.